guys, this is Yoda. So Blizzard recently dropped some massive patch tuning that is going to be coming out with a weekly reset. A lot of classes getting nerfed, a lot of buffs, so we'll start from the top here. Blood DK, Deathbringer is getting pretty big damage buffs. Sand Lane is getting slightly nerfed with Blood Beast doing a lot less damage. I believe Sand Lane is still going to do more damage in keys, so this is actually an overall nerf to Blood DK. Which is kind of sad because Blood DK is really underrepresented right now in the top ranks. Frost DK is getting buffs, the same basically Deathbringer buffs that Blood got are also going to Frost, which is way more impactful for Frost because Deathbringer is actually the best tree for Frost. So Frost DK is going to be doing a lot more damage. I would expect to see DKs getting ready to play multiple specs, particularly in low target count dungeons like Theater of Pain, and maybe also in Rookery. We'll see. Unholy, very small nerfs. Blood is Life nerfed by from 25 to 20%, which is about a 20% nerf to Blood is Life, roughly 3-ish% overall. Not enough, in my opinion, to bring them out of the meta, but it does make the keys harder. Groups are in general going to be doing less AoE damage. BDH, small nerf here. Silent Sigil, base duration nerf to 2 seconds. So it's worth considering that you have a talent that increases the duration by 2 seconds. So realistically, right now it's 6 seconds, and that's being nerfed to 4. And this nerf to Eldrazi Reaver is not real. Just don't even look at it. It's like less than 1% of your healing or something. Maybe 1%, but who cares? So this combined with the Unholy nerf all means that AoE pulls with a bunch of casters are now going to be harder because a lot of the time you're on a clock to kill the pack before you're like your beam and silent sigil and all your kicks, you run out of kicks. And you know, once your beam and silent sigil are over and you run out of AoE stops, kicks are just going to go off, and a lot of the times that means a wipe. So AoE damage is going to be you're going to be pressured to do AoE damage is the best way to put it in my opinion in a bunch of these caster packs, particularly in the Motherlode and Priory of the Sacred Flame. Guardian, this is not a nerf. I don't even know why they wrote this here. It doesn't do anything. Boomy is getting an AoE damage nerf, but they're getting compensated with single target increases and quote-unquote all spell increases. The Discord, I think, says like 1% increase to overall. So it's basically, in my opinion, going to be a net neutral in a real key where you're doing massive pulls, but it's going to be more skewed towards single target. So your AoE is actually going down by quite a bit. So, you know, Boomy AoE getting nerfed, Unholy AoE getting nerfed, and the clock is shorter because Silent Sigil is nerfed. So AoE stops and AoE damage is going to be at a premium. Not going into the new patch. Evoker, I'm pretty sure this is not nearly enough, still dead. Arcane, so Arcane is getting a buff. I think Arcane was already very, very strong. So I think a lot of people are going to probably start playing it more in high keys. We'll have to wait to see, but I think Arcane is probably one of the best mage specs right now. Fire, I don't think you're going to play Frostfire in keys, so this doesn't really affect Mythic Plus. Brewmaster is getting a massive buff, so this is one of their passives. Armor increased by 10%. Mastery is getting increased and some damage buffs, and also Celestial Brew absorb amount going up by 20%. This is going to make Brew significantly tankier in my opinion. Also, you're going to be doing way more damage, especially on single target. Brew still suffers, in my opinion, from being one of the 2 tanks that doesn't drastically affect how your group does interrupts, along with Bear. For instance, Warrior has AoE Kick, VDH has Silence, Blood DK even has AoE Group Silence, Prop Paladin has Avenger's Shield, etc. Brewmaster has like freaking Clash and Romp, which I don't really count. So in my opinion, it's gonna be pretty good, but you know, it's still missing that extra stuff that other tanks bring to the table. Mistweaver, I believe this is a nerf, particularly to healing bosses and to their single target damage. I think Mistweaver was kind of overperforming on live right now, so this is probably a warranted change. Although obviously they're not as good as Dispriest, so I don't know. I'm not sure they deserved it, but this is a nerf. Windwalker is getting a small buff, I think, but not sure it's going to do very much. Holy Paladin, I believe this is going to be a minor buff. Remains to be seen. I think this led to the Martyr buff might make a new build viable, but I don't know Holy Paladin well enough to say. We'll have to wait and see what Ellesmere cooks up. Red Paladin, I don't think you're going to play Herald of the Sun, but I don't know Red Paladin well enough to really say. Dispriest is getting hit with some massive nerfs, so Wheel and Woe is increasing Power Word Shield by half the amount, which means you're getting, it's like a overall, I think 20 to 30% nerf to the strength of your average Power Word Shield. In terms of keeping like random party members alive for one shots, this is not really going to matter. Like if the shield is 2/3 of your health bar instead of your full health bar, who really cares? What this is going to matter a lot for is tank healing. So tanks actually use the full shield usually. And also just random HPS checks where Power Word Shield was a large portion of your HPS is going to be, and it's going to be going down. Also, penance, damage, and healing reduced is also going to affect your HPS quite a bit. Things like Swamp Face or the third boss in Dark Flame Cleft are now going to be a lot harder for Dispriest, and the first boss in Floodgate as well. A lot of heal checks might be harder for Disc Priest. And if you're having trouble with the healing and you're also doing like pathetically low damage as Oracle Disc Priest, then, you know, suddenly the best healer being Oracle Disc Priest is coming into question, in my opinion. The atonement changes. I believe this is basically just a wash. And Void Weaver randomly getting buffed, but I don't think you're going to play Void Weaver in keys. I would be surprised. Someone said potentially Rookery. Could see that. Holy Priest is getting some buffs. I am not sure if this is going to be enough for Holy Priest to become like the main priest healer spec in keys. That would surprise me. So there's that. Ellie Shaman is getting a small single target buff / priority damage buff. I don't think this is going to make a big difference. It's going to be like less than 1% overall increase in keys. I think it's like 1 to 2% single target, so it's probably like less than 1% overall increase in keys. Stormbringer is getting a massive buff. This is actually the biggest buff of the patch. I think I heard it's like upwards of 8% to Stormbringer enhance. So it's possible that Stormbringer is back. We'll have to wait and see how this plays out because Stormbringer is not the stronger hero talent at the moment in Mythic Plus. I think it could end up being really good. Not really sure. One of the troubles that Enhanced Shaman suffers from is that, as we mentioned in many previous videos, Shaman utility is kind of a miss this season. Poison Cleansing Totems not super useful, Decurse not super useful, Tremor, etc. But you do still have really short kick, and you do still have double AoE stop, so that is really nice. Resto Shaman is getting some single target buffs to the Farseer tree. I'm not sure if people are actually going to play Farseer, but in my opinion, Resto Shaman is in a pretty good spot with the Disc Priest nerfs. Warlock also getting massive buffs. I heard Demo is already performing very well in keys, and it's getting like an upwards of 8% damage buff, which means Demo is going to be doing massive damage when the keys start. In my opinion, the biggest issue with Demo is trying to fit it into the comp, because right now you have like Boomy, which is OP and has Mark of the Wild, Mage, which is OP and has Arcane Intellect, and Unholy DK, which is, you know, OP and has Crypts and AMS. So it's really hard to fit the Warlock into the comp. I could see playing it over DK in a lot of dungeons, but the dungeons where you really need a DK, you like really need a DK. So yeah, it's kind of hard to fit it into the comp, but in terms of like pugging specific dungeons, I could see Warlock being probably the best pick. So we'll move on to the tier list that I kind of made alongside chat the night of the patch. So the meta comp, I would still say we're going to keep the 3 DPS and VDH up there. VDH still, in my opinion, is the meta tank. It just requires very little healing. AoE grip into beam into silence is still a really nice combo, and of course Chaos Brand. Warrior, in my opinion, is on the up and up, however. AoE kick with Disrupting Shout is now the longest silence in the game. It's longer than Silent Sigil, which is kind of nice. And Battle Shout when there's an Unholy DK in your group is also nice, or potentially maybe more melee. For healers, I have removed Oracle Disc from S tier. I would not be surprised to see healer balance being extremely good now, with HPAL Disc, with like basically every healing class being viable. I only put Prez Evoker in A tier because it's just harder to play with a Prez, or A- tier rather. It's harder to play with a Prez. You have to be aware of like their range, which you don't have to worry about with other healers. In my opinion, Resto Shaman also could be a sleeper meta pick right now. AoE stops are at an all-time high value because of the, you know, the nerf to Silent Sigil and the nerf to AoE damage. So having a couple AoE stops to extend the pull would be really useful. Also, if you notice, there is no Shaman DPS in the S tier, so Resto Shaman does provide a unique Shaman buff, which I think is better for overall group damage than Power Infusion. So yeah, Resto Shaman Song is, in my opinion, potentially a sleeper meta pick right now. As far as the DPS go, I think the top 3 are still probably going to be played. You know, all 3 mages are seeing play in top keys. Boomy, I think, is way too OP now for replace. Unholy did catch a small nerf. I could see like Frost DK being played over Unholy in certain keys, and potentially Demo Warlock in TGP replacing Unholy in certain keys. But in terms of like overall, just like playing with one person for every key, I think Unholy is definitely still deserves a spot in the S tier. So we already talked about some of the DPS. Warlock caught some massive buffs. MM Hunter has been doing massive damage. I think BM Hunter is still pretty good. Probably not as good as MM Hunter in most of the dungeons. Dev Evoker is still pretty good. Kess has been doing massive damage. The one thing though about Dev Evoker is that you kind of really want PI. Without PI, your damage is a bit lackluster, and also no raid buff. You do have really good group utility for survivability. For instance, double Renewing Blaze, double Rescue, Cauterizing Flame are all super useful, but no raid buff means that your damage contribution is a bit low, especially considering that you need PI to play the spec properly, in my opinion. Frost DK did catch some pretty big buffs, so we're moving it up to the A tier. As I mentioned, I think it could be played over Unholy in quite a few keys. We'll have to see how it plays out. The Shamans, I'll put them together here, are doing really good damage in my opinion. We'll have to see how Stormbringer plays out, as Enhanced Shaman, I think it might be doing really good damage. One of the problems with Shaman, however, is that it is a bit squishy compared to its counterpart, which is Mage. Basically, you know, you need a lust for your comp, and if you're not playing Mage, then you're probably playing Shaman. Or if you're, rather, conversely, if you want to play Shaman, then you have to replace the Mage. And Mage is really tanky when played well, right? They have Alter, they have Mass Barrier, of course, but Shaman doesn't have. Arcane has like some weird thing, interaction with their shield where they take less magic damage, lower duration dots. Obviously, Ice Block, Mass Invis, or sorry, Greater Invis. I mean, I'm not saying Shaman is squishy compared to like a normal class, but compared to Mage, it is squishy. So the hardest part about including a Shaman in the comp is just surviving the key. If you are able to survive the key, I think Shaman is probably better for time than most Mage specs. Feral Druid is also in the A tier. It does really good damage. However, one problem with Feral is that it is a melee DPS. And Boomkin is really strong right now, and melee DPS, as we mentioned in many videos before, every single time you add a melee DPS to the comp after the first one, the key becomes much harder to play. Obviously, it is doable. People are playing triple melee DPS in high keys. There's a warrior comp doing really good, but I would say the key definitely becomes harder. Red Pally is doing really good damage. Really good group survivability. There could be potentially a comp with Red Pelly and some Shaman, some form of Shaman in the group. But yeah, I'll leave it in the A tier instead of the S tier because Unholy DK seems to be the best melee, and you really only want one melee. Rogues have been doing really high keys. There's been some triple melee comp with a Rogue doing really high keys. I think it's like Rot Warrior, Resto Shaman, Rogue, Unholy, and I forget who their last DPS is. And there's also Squish's group playing Outlaw in almost every key, doing really high keys. And DPS Warrior randomly is also showing up. I believe, check here, Warrior DPS far over is doing really high keys. This is the Resto Shaman group. This group has been doing really high keys. It looks like it's just a melee cleave with VDH tank. It looks like a really open meta right now. A lot of really strong DPS. I do have brought Paladin in the A- tier, and I did move Blood Decay to B. Blood Decay just seems to be super underrepresented right now in the top ranks. If we look at class and role leaderboard, DK tanks, the highest one is 3443, which is like 16s and some 17s, which honestly is puggable. You can literally pug this as a VDH like pretty easily, in my opinion. Easily is of course relative, but yeah, if someone wants to prove that Blood Decay doesn't belong in B tier, then be my guest, but for now we're leaving it in the B tier. Prot Paladin also, after some more testing, seems like it is a bit squishier, a bit too squishy for my taste, so I'm leaving it in the A- tier. I think it just requires too much external healing. If you play with a Disc Priest, it does kind of work out because the Disc Priest needs help sometimes and you need help sometimes, and you can kind of help each other, particularly Oracle Disc Priest. But with Oracle Disc Priest getting nerfed, I think Prot Paladin is also going to be a little bit sadder because your healer just has less to give you. So yeah, we're leaving Prot Paladin in the A- tier. We're also putting Brew with Bear in the A- tier, mainly because they just don't really interact with interrupts as well as the other tanks, which we kind of went over. Squish is obviously doing really high keys with Bear, but he is kind of the only one. And Brew remains to be seen how good the Brew buffs actually are. But we'll leave it in A- tier for now. Maybe potentially could move it up later if someone proves that it belongs there. As for these 3 DPS, I feel like they're just underplayed. You can easily do really high keys with these DPS. It's just that no group is actually doing it. So, you know, it remains unproven. Same kind of goes for Shadow Priest. I would say with Oracle Disc Priest getting nerfed, I could see more groups playing with Shadow Priest. But it just feels like it's just so locked at the top level of DPS that it's really hard to fit Shadow Priest into the comp. And we still have Og considered dead. Left to right obviously does not matter in any of my tier lists. I think class balance is good enough that it doesn't make sense to just make like a ladder. And if there's a class that's in the same tier, honestly, if there's a class like in World of Warcraft, you really still just bring the better player over the better class as long as you have like Lust in your group and decently good raid buffs. It really doesn't matter what you bring, even in the highest keys. It just comes down to the players and how you make it work. We will revisit this obviously in a week. This is like a pre-tier list. The patch hasn't even come out yet, so no one really knows how it's going to play out. This is just my prediction. So yeah, we'll revisit it next week. And for now, thank you for watching. Peace out.